Years ago, David Letterman did a top 10 Mike Dukakis excuses for losing the '88 election, and the only one I really remember out of that list was ill-conceived campaign pledge to tax you bastards back to the Stone Age. And that, of course, was right after, just a couple of years after Walter Mondale said, I'm going to raise your taxes, and then lost 49 states. But right now, if polls are correct, Americans are in the mood to soak the rich. This seems to be a winning election proposition. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is The Right Angle on Soaking It to the Rich, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Gents, on Monday morning, Politico reported that polling suggests that when it comes to soaking the rich, the American public is increasingly on board. According to a poll they conducted along with Morning Consult, 76% of registered voters believe the wealthiest Americans should pay more in taxes. And even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's plan to slap a 70% marginal rate on income earned over $10 million clocked in at 59%. That's a big margin, and that doesn't come from Politico. That one comes from a Hill Harris X poll. Bill, are we fighting real headwinds on taxes here?
Dude, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, there was a time when this country was proud of businessmen, when it was somebody was actually like a celebrity because they'd, gotten off a boat with $4 and now they're building Carnegie Hall. That would be Carnegie in this particular example. Yeah, it's just, I think it's part of this whole ongoing socialist indoctrination, and there's so many things to say about this. First of all, the rich don't get soaked. Okay, the reason most people are rich is because, at least in terms of finances, they're smarter than the rest of us.
Yeah.
That at least in that one area, they are smarter than the rest of us, so they don't get soaked. When you get down to an income tax, the really wealthy people don't make any money really off of income. You really get down to Bill Gates. You're not taxing Bill Gates's paycheck, right? It's like Bill Gates's paycheck is not $40 billion a year. Bill Gates probably gets a six-figure paycheck or something. Everything else is taken care of by his foundations and all the rest of it. So first of all, the idea that you're going to soak the rich is nuts, because the rich, they will not be soaked. If you soak them enough, they'll leave. And that's, somebody once said to me, there's nothing more mobile than a rich person. I thought, wow, that's actually pretty true. Now, if you really, really, really wanted to soak the rich, if you decided you really wanted to stick it to the rich, then you'd have a sales tax. You'd have a flat rate sales tax, because in a flat rate sales tax, first of all, nobody cheats. Criminals, gangbangers, drug dealers, they're all paying their taxes because they got to buy stuff. And if you have a flat rate sales tax, the more you buy, the more you pay. Now, rich people don't make most of their money on income. Income is mostly generated by the middle class. So when you raise the taxes on income, the entire idea of an income tax is soaking the working rather than really soaking the rich. I'm not saying the rich don't work. I'm just saying it's soaking people who go out and work and have an income. When most of your money comes from investments, capital gains, all the rest of this stuff, increasing the income tax doesn't punish those people. So I think we ought to be punished equally, and punished equally means we all pay the same rate. And if you had a sales tax, the richer you were, the more you would pay, because rich people buy expensive stuff. And that is the only equitable way, both in terms of effectiveness and in terms of morality, to get to this state of more money because God knows the federal government doesn't bring in enough.
Yeah, over $3 trillion a year.
$3,500 billion is not enough. We're just obviously don't have anything like enough money to do what we need to do.
Yeah, folks, what Bill is talking about with the sales tax is best represented by the fair tax. And if you're at all interested, I encourage everybody to go to fairtax.org. I'm a big proponent of exactly what Bill was talking about, and you can find out everything you need to know about it at fairtax.org. And those are
here
my
come the hounds.
dogs.
They heard the left heard me talking about a fair tax, and here they come.
Release the hounds.
Release the hounds.
It's Tuesday. It's probably the trash guys, and well, I got 3 very excited dogs. Scott, the story goes on. You might say, oh, Harris X, Politico, that's all biased stuff. But that same Politico report said that according to a recent Fox News survey, showed that 70% of Americans favor raising taxes on those earning over $10 million, including 54% of Republicans. And there's also big support for Liz Warren's wealth tax, which is probably unconstitutional as a direct tax. But Scott, this is the part that bugs me. Nobody's talking about the constitutionality of it. What they're talking about is, can we get away with it? Can we make these rich people pay up?
Well,
That's bad news, isn't it?
Yes, and I think what it says, above all else, when Republicans and Democrats both agree that we need to jack up taxes on the wealthy, whether you're taxing their wealth or taxing their income, is that they have utterly given up on any hope that the government will somehow be able to rein in its spending. So the conversation about cutting government spending, I mean, when's the last time you heard a serious debate on that issue or a serious discussion on that issue? It's an assumed government is going to need ever increasing amounts of money. So the only question now is, how do we get it? There's no conversation about why do we need that much? And is there any way that we could need less of that? And so that's the really kind of demoralizing thing about all of this, is that that's the poll question. Where's the poll that says Americans are sick to death that the government spends $3.5 trillion a year? That, to me, is the live question that needs to be dealt with. I mean, you can pinch off the hose if you want to, and that will make the biggest impact. And we just don't seem to be talking about that at all. It's just, how are we going to take care of, what comes out of the hose and soaking everybody. So that, and I made a note to myself here, because I think that there is to a certain extent, this is a reasonable reaction on the part of a lot of American people to what they perceive to be the amorality of corporate decisions. And I'm not saying immoral, I'm just saying amoral. Yeah. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of talk in the boardrooms about what's the best way we can structure this company so that everybody really wins. They pay lip service to it from time to time. They say, the people are our greatest resource, blah, 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 and it reminds me of that scene from The Office where Michael Scott is repeatedly going, it's the people, it's the people. And I think that this ought to be a wake-up call to anybody who's running a business, big or small, that says, are you really making sure that you've kind of fine-tuned the inputs in your expenses and your income to maximize the production? So I think most corporations could probably make more money if they were willing to share some more of the upside and possibly some of the downside with their staff. I know that this sounds like I'm some sort of communist barking lunatic, but I don't buy into either school. I don't think that all workers are virtuous. I don't think that all business people are virtuous. I think they're all humans. And I think that every one of them, worker and boss alike, will get all that he can get. But I think you're cutting your own throat if you're a union boss who just tries to wring the last drop of blood out of a dying creature. And you're cutting your own throat if you're a corporate boss who's saying, hey, I want to take an ever larger share of this expanding pie without sharing it with others. I think if we bring a little, for want of a better term, righteousness into our business thinking, I think we'll all do better, and there'll be less calls for soaking the rich.
Can I add one thing?
Sure, go ahead, Bill.
I just meant to say this, just so it's said, right now the top 5% of income owners are paying 65% of the total income taxes. Yeah. The bottom 50% pays none. That just needs to get on the record. But the thing that I find most destructive about these kind of taxes is, what is the definition of rich? It's $10 million in this case. Is that where all of this stuff kicks in? Let's go back to Bernie Sanders in 2016. He said he wanted to put a 93% income tax on anything that was more than, I think, $414,000 a year. So if I'm looking at making $600,000-$700,000 a year, or $1 million or $2 million, and I'm getting ready to hire all these people and bring in new staff and buy new trucks or open a new branch of my restaurant, and I find out that if I make $414,000 a year, I'm going to get taxed at 93%, then I'm going to make $413,999 that year, and I'll keep it. So this idea that by soaking the rich, you're somehow taking money into the system, you're not. If you put a limit above which something enormously detrimental happens to the person making the money, then they'll just make $9,999,999. You won't get your tax, and you won't get your businesses either. You won't get your hiring, and you won't get your staffing, and you won't get your growth, and you won't get your raises. You won't get any of that. If somebody was ready to do a $20 million year, and now all of a sudden they're getting hit with this, they'll do a $10 million year, and they'll take the $10 million home, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, folks, income inequality is not one of these things I really worry about very much, although it's certainly the cause du jour for our friends on the left. But if you want to reduce income inequality, there are much better ways to do it than soaking the rich. One example, one of the few things I disagree with on Ronald Reagan is his administration repealed the regulation preventing businesses from buying back their own stock, which is essentially almost a bribe to their shareholders instead of investing in the company. And the other thing I might do if I were of such a mind would be to get serious about blocking these huge mergers and acquisitions. It kind of force companies to have nothing better to invest in than either new products or their own employees or both. Something like that would go a lot further than the income tax. And let's talk about the 70% rate that, we had that in the 50s and it was so much better then, or this 91% rate that we used to have in the early 60s. Nobody ever paid those. Nobody. As Bill mentioned during his answer, the rich have accountants, they have lawyers, they have tax shelters, they have congressmen on the payroll and all the rest, and they never, ever pay those huge published rates that Washington used to try and collect in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It just didn't happen. What did happen, though, is instead of making investments in businesses and jobs and all the rest, people shopped around for tax shelters instead.
That's right.
So investment money just sat there. And we could get away with that in the 50s and 60s when we were competing against Europe that was still rebuilding from the war, Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. There were communist basket cases. China was shut off from the world. Japan was in recovery. We didn't have anybody to compete with. We could afford to be stupid. We can't afford to be stupid anymore, folks. So let's call this what it really is. And Washington wants to raise tax rates and include all these new loopholes, which you know is going to happen. What they're really talking about isn't reducing income inequality. They're not talking about raising more revenue. What they're really talking about doing is gathering the reins of power back in Washington so that they can distribute the goodies to their friends and punish their enemies through the tax code. So that's what this is really about. Let's be honest about that, all right? So there's your right angle on soaking the rich, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. If you like what you see, come on board. We'd love to have you as members. Go to BillWhittle.com, hit that sign-up button. We'd love to see you there. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.